2024, I gave a talk, a kind of basic introduction to Kemetic religion talk. It had started out as a very small talk with a few people that I knew, and it just kind of grew. More people wanted to tune in and listen, and we decided to broadcast it online. And now I'm making it into videos, so why not, right? The video itself is pretty long, so I'm going to break it up into smaller pieces. The segment that we're going to talk about today is Ma'at, and I think that is an excellent place to start. It is possibly the most important concept in Kemetic religion. So, a bit of a disclaimer, I am not an Egyptologist. I do not have a degree in Egyptology. I will be putting a link to some recommended reading in the description, and those books are where I got a lot of the information for my talk. The rest of it is my own take on that information, my thoughts as I read them. So I hope you enjoy. And if you have anything to say, any comments or questions or things that you'd like to add, then please comment below, and I'll see you after the talk. Bye.
Welcome everyone to today's Spokane Magical Moot is very excited to present with Banu, who is going to talk to us today about ancient Egyptian religion, and she has a lot of good stuff to share. I'm going to just let her take it away.
Hi everyone, my name is Banu. I go by Wedem Banu online sometimes. I am a reconstructionist Kemetic, so that's going to be my bias today. I will explain what that means in just a few. I would love to hear your questions, but I'm going to ask that you please hold them to the end because I am very easily distractible, and I would like to make sure that I get over all of this material. And one last thing, I personally love ritual and tools and all of the paraphernalia that goes with it, but you do not need to buy a whole bunch of stuff to be Kemetic. I know I am a bad example of that, so I just wanted to say something about that up front. So, Kemetic religion. Well, first of all, let's go over a few terms. One of the things that people worry about the most when they first come to Kemetic religion is all of these weird words, and am I pronouncing them correctly? And I'm here to set your mind at ease because there is no proper pronunciation of these terms that we know of. The ancient Egyptians did not record their vowels, so we don't actually know what those values would be. It is a scholarly convention to insert an E anywhere that would make these consonant frames more pronounceable, but that is not actually how they were pronounced. So what we have is kind of a made-up language that nobody would really understand. So you can pronounce it however you want. There is a fairly new field of study in Egyptology. As far as I know, it's new. It is the phonetic reconstruction of ancient Egyptian language, and it's really cool, but it's kind of complicated. It's kind of a linguistic detective story. You have to study many different contemporary languages of ancient Egyptian language, try to find places where they attempted to write ancient Egyptian words in their own alphabets, which did record vowels, while also bearing in mind that those alphabets were designed to express the sounds that were used in those languages, not necessarily ancient Egyptian, and what you get is an ancient Egyptian word with a heavy accent. So it is a very interesting field of study, and ultimately we'll never know with 100% certainty how these words were spoken. And I personally believe that Jehuti, that is Thoth, however you pronounce his name. I believe that he designed all languages and that all languages are sacred and magical. And so speaking in English is just as good as an attempt at ancient Egyptian. So Kemetic religion has many different expressions. There's a spectrum that goes from what I have come to call Kemetic eclectics on one end, and these are people who maybe they worship ancient Egyptian gods, but they do so in the framework of another religion. For example, there is a branch of Wicca called Tamaran Wicca or Tamaran Wicca, which is all about ancient Egypt worshipped through the Wiccan framework. Or they will worship the ancient Egyptian gods in a somewhat Egyptian inspired way, but they bring elements from other religions into it. And that spectrum can change all the way up to way on the other end where we have the Kemetic Reconstructionists, which is what I am. And Kemetic Reconstructionists place a high value on academic sources, focusing entirely on ancient Egypt, trying not to bring other things into it, and trying to, if things have to be changed, and some things do have to be changed because we are not ancient Egyptians living in ancient Egypt and never will be, but trying to do it in a way which is respectful to the culture and which hopefully would have been recognizable to the ancient Egyptians if they were alive today. So I've got some words up here. The word Kemetic is derived from the word Kemet, which is what the ancient Egyptians called their nation. Kem is black, and T's on the ends of words are feminine endings, and Kemet translates roughly to the Black Land. It's a reference to the fertile black silt which the Nile River deposited along its banks after it flooded. That is in opposition to the desert, which the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians called the Red Land or Deshret. And I suspect, I don't know for sure, but I suspect that that's probably because in pictures I've seen of the Egyptian desert at sunrise, it has kind of a rosy hue to the sands. Now we have two deities next. There's Ma'at. Ma'at is probably the most important concept in Kemetic religion. It can be one of two things: an ethical principle, which is native to ancient Egypt, or a goddess who personifies that principle. And we'll talk more about her later. Next, we have Heka, which is often translated as magic, and it can be either the practice of magic or a god who embodies the power and practice of magic. Next on my list, we have Isfet, which is basically the opposite of Ma'at. And once we talk about Ma'at, you'll know exactly what Isfet is. We have the Aku, who are the blessed dead. These are slightly different than ancestors. Some folks like to translate this as ancestors. Ancestors are people who are related to you by blood. The Aku are any blessed dead. They don't have to necessarily be related to you. And then I have a series of 4 terms on the bottom, which are often used among Kemetics when we're discussing our gods. And it's basically 4 different versions of the word for God in Middle Egyptian. First, we have Necher, which is God. And I had a friend who was studying in university and specializing in phonetic reconstruction of the ancient Egyptian languages. So I have access to some of his work, and he had reconstructed the sound of this word as Nachar. Then we have Necheret, which is goddess, which might have sounded like Nacharat. And then we have Nejeru, which is the plural masculine gods, and that would be Nachuru. And then the plural for goddesses, Necherut, which is a little bit more difficult. It's just a slightly longer A on the end, so Nacherat. All right, so Kemetic religion is inclusive. We are not a closed practice. There is no one alive today who has a direct line to ancient Egypt. You are not offending anyone by practicing ancient Egyptian religion. And even back in ancient times, ancient Egyptian religion was practiced in many different places throughout the world and throughout the ancient world anyway. And when the ancient Egyptians conquered their neighbors, they wouldn't force their gods on them. They would build temples to those people's gods, but they would build them in an ancient Egyptian way. So clearly they didn't have any problem with people using their techniques. So we do not exclude people on the basis of race. The ancient Egyptian concept of race was not the same as what we consider today, at any rate. We today base race largely on skin color, whereas to the ancient Egyptians, it was largely based on culture. If you were someone who moved to ancient Egypt and you were willing to take up ancient Egyptian ways, you were Egyptian. You were racially Egyptian. But if you were someone who moved to ancient Egypt and did not take up ancient Egyptian ways, like say maybe you were a Greek who segregated yourself from the ancient Egyptians, then that's when the tension would start up. There is a group today who views ancient Egypt in more of a racially charged way. And I understand, I think, why they do it. I don't agree with it. But if you meet someone who tells you that you cannot practice ancient Egyptian religion because of the race that you are, you met one of them, not one of us. We do not exclude anybody on the basis of race or ethnicity, and gender. As for gender, the ancient Egyptians were also very open about gender. We have gods who express different points on the gender scale as well. We have a goddess Neat, for example, who is described as being 2/3 masculine and 1/3 feminine. We have very powerful, active, aggressive goddesses like Sekhmet, who we'll meet later, and also very nurturing gods like Hapi, the god of the abundance of the Nile River. And finally, we also are very open to everyone of any sexual orientation. You'll see the picture that I have on my slide here is from a tomb of two men, Neak Num and Khnumhotep. And if you watched the video that I posted earlier, you will know that these two men are perhaps the earliest recorded same-sex couple in history. If you haven't watched the video, I do highly recommend it. It's very entertaining. These two men were manicurists to the king because, of course, the first two gay men were manicurists, but being a manicurist to the king was a very high status position because not just anybody can get that close to the king. They touched the king. These were very clearly highly respected, highly trusted men, and they were given a tomb which would have had to have had the approval of Pharaoh, so he was okay with it. They were given a tomb where they were buried together, and they are portrayed in several places within that tomb in positions which would normally be taken by a man and his wife, such as this picture that I have up, which is the absolute most intimate gesture that you can get in polite Egyptian artistic iconography. This is a hug and a kiss. So Ma'at. What is Ma'at? It is an ethical principle native to ancient Egypt, as I said. Some attempts at translating it into English have been balance, justice, harmony, truth, and divine order. But actually, it's more than that. I find it easiest to understand it as a system of healthy relationships in balance. It's a community-oriented philosophy, and that community extends beyond humans, involving all the members of our world, including the land, the plants, the animals, spirits, including the spirits of the dead, and gods. An act of ma'at is one which helps restore our world as a healthy place to live, where society functions in a responsible and useful way, and everyone's treated fairly. This extends beyond humans, as I said, but it's explained from a human perspective in the ancient writings, which have been found and translated, because they're usually written, obviously, by humans, for humans, as instructions on how to live a good human life. Ma'at was the intended state of the world. If you read Egyptian mythology, you'll see that, first of all, the Egyptians believed that everything created by the gods, including humans, was intrinsically good. When the world was first created, it existed in a perfect state of ma'at, perfect balance. But not soon after that, we see the entrance of a giant evil serpent entity named Apep. Depending on the myth that you read, he either accidentally comes into being, which is a big whoops, or he invades from the surrounding chaos that is flowing all around this bubble of order, which is the created world. Either way, he immediately starts to attack. He destroys the balance of the world, and he causes a condition which the ancient Egyptians called Isfet. Isfet is the source of all harm, suffering, and injustice. As time passes, Isfet continues to corrupt the perfection of creation, and this is why the ancient Egyptians often preferred traditional representations, traditional forms of things. The closer something was to the beginning of the world, the more pristine it was. Their goal was to return to that perfect state of Ma'at that existed at the beginning of time. But no matter what Isfet does, no matter what the forces of Isfet do, they believe that the world was still a divine gift, and it still contains its potential for good and beauty. This slide is, there's a picture of Ma'at there on one side, and these words here are epithets of Ma'at which describe her role. So we have who gave this land at the beginning, who keeps the land alive through the activity of her arms. Ma'at was viewed as being the structure which supported the life of everything that lived in this created world. Who creates her own character, who removes evil, one lives by her, who keeps the gods alive, the mistress of kindness, the mistress of eternity, the beloved one. One of the most important roles of the gods is to uphold the divine order. The gods fight the forces of Isfet so that Ma'at can be established in its place. But there are limits to everything. The ancient Egyptians didn't believe that their gods were omnipotent or omniscient. They're very powerful, very wise. It's easy to look like they are omnipotent or omniscient, but they can only do so much. And because of that, it's very important that people be their allies in this fight. So a major part of the Kemetic lifestyle is living in accordance with this idea of Ma'at. It's viewed as being everyone's responsibility. And there are many types of relationships to consider. There's humans as groups and individuals. There's relationships with the land, with the animals that live on the land, the animals that are under your care. There's relationships with the plants around you, relationships with the gods, and with the spirits of the dead. When a relationship is in a state of ma'at, everyone in that relationship is able to live in a way that fulfills their own potential without taking advantage of the other. And it gets even more complicated than that. There's relationships between relationships. Everything is interconnected. So if any relationship in the community falls out of balance, that imbalance will spread through the connections in the community, making a state of ma'at more difficult for everyone else to achieve. Despite this, there are no explicit set of rules to tell us what is and is not ma'at. It's a highly situational concept, and every situation has to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. We do have a class of writings called the wisdom literature, which we can read and contemplate for guidance. This wisdom literature is not divinely inspired. It's written by humans. These are humans who were generally considered to be wise, but they can be wrong. So it's important to read everything with critical thinking skills in place. It can cover subjects ranging from religion to table manners, because remember, ma'at governs everything and everything is connected. So how do we apply ma'at in our lives? Different people might choose different areas to choose on because it's such a huge field. No one person is going to be able to do it all. For me, I find that animal welfare and subjects of environmental concern are very important, and that's where I put most of my energy. But you might also be involved in, for example, social justice. Maybe you're really into politics. Maybe you want to support the homeless. There are just so many ways to help. There's also this character in some of the wisdom literature called the silent man. And this isn't somebody who just is quiet all the time and lets everybody else say and do whatever they think. This is someone who listens more than they speak, whose words are measured. They're modest, they don't spout off at the mouth, they're less likely to poison their community with poorly chosen words. And the ancient Egyptians really had a lot of respect for the power of words. So if you wanted to, so some other ways of supporting ma'at would be supporting members of your community who are in need, avoiding actions which would cause unnecessary social drama. You don't want to cause unnecessary suffering, anger, sadness, distress for people. We've got enough stress in our life already. You could give the animals under your care everything that they needed to thrive. Just pick something that resonates with you and do your best. But we're only responsible for advancing ma'at when it's reasonably achievable. If doing good means that a person will make themselves into another victim, then they haven't improved the overall health of the community. They've just switched out one victim for another. And therefore, they haven't improved the state of ma'at which the community was in. So sometimes we'll see statements such as this one from an official named Nefer Seshem Ra, who says, "I rescued the weak from the hand of one stronger than he when I was able." And I feel that those last four words are extremely important. This is a very different concept of a righteous person than what we have in the modern world, where we think that a truly good person is going to give and give and give of themselves until it hurts and then they're going to give a little more, and it almost doesn't count until it gets to that point. But and when I was younger, I had a real martyr complex. This was a revolutionary lesson for me to learn. It taught me to think of myself as being part of the community that I'm trying to help. I'm not separated from the world. If I want to heal the world, I have to heal myself too.
And that was not. So I hope that that was interesting, maybe thought-provoking. If it was, let me know below. What did you learn? What did I miss? There is so much to be said on this subject that I'm sure that I missed something. I've often thought that the pursuit of Ma'at, the contemplation of Ma'at, her nature, is something that could take up an entire lifetime, and it would be time well spent. But I would love to hear back from you, what you thought of that, and the next video is going to be on the Nacheru, the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt, and I'll see you then. Bye.